Welcome to video lesson 5.3. Today, in this video, I'm going to be talking about comparing and ordering integers. Please fill out your table of contents. We are on page 57, and you can just title it, the title of the lesson, Compare and Order Integers. You're going to need that note sheet. All you're going to need to do is fold it. So go ahead and fill that in, and I'll show you what to do with the note sheet. So like I said, all you need to do is fold it. There's this one column on the right hand side. You can just fold that in so that it'll fit, and that is all you have to do, and then tack it in on page 57. So there's three things that I'm going to talk about today with respect to comparing integers and ordering them. So in order to compare, you can do a couple of different things. So the first thing you can do is just compare the signs. Is it positive or negative? And positive numbers, you can fill this in with me. Positive numbers are always going to be greater than negative numbers. That makes sense because negative numbers are less than 0. So very quickly we can practice this with 3 quick examples. The positive number gets the 2 dots, and we are going to be using the greater than, less than, or equal to symbol when we're comparing sometimes. So that would be 3 is greater than negative 8. 5 is the positive number, so that gets the symbol open towards the bigger number. And then again, the 6 is the positive number, and it gets the 2 dots because it's bigger, and we have 6 is greater than negative 1. So very simply put, positive numbers are always going to be bigger than negative numbers. You can just compare the signs. The second thing you can do when you are comparing integers is to actually visualize or put numbers on a number line. Compare their actual location or compare their place on the number line. So numbers to the right are always going to be larger or greater than numbers to the left of them. So as you move to the right, the numbers get bigger, no matter whether it is negative or positive. So let's do these examples. We're actually going to use the number line and actually place the numbers on the number line or graph them like we did in lesson 1. So 4 and 9, we have 4 and 9. 9 is farther to the right, therefore that is the bigger number. Obviously with 2 positive numbers it's a little bit easier. Let's do negative 5 and 0. Notice 0 is the one that is farthest to the right, so that is the greater number. And the last one we're going to do, negative 2 and negative 6. Notice negative 2 is the one that's closer to 0, farther to the right, therefore that is the bigger number. So placing them on the number line is another way to compare. Now the other thing I wanted to tell you is that when you're comparing 2 negative numbers, that's the trickiest in my opinion to do. So I have a final little piece of advice for when you're comparing 2 negative numbers. And we talked a little bit about this in class. The larger negative digit, if you just look at the digit, the numbers of the negative number, the larger negative digit has the lowest or smallest value. So you can think about that idea of debt. The bigger the number, the digit is in the negative, the larger the debt, but it still is a very, very small number as you go towards the left of the 0. So the other point is just that. The farther away from 0 you are, or the farther away from 0 the negative number is, the smaller the value, or the smaller the number. So if we're just thinking about what is the larger digit between 9 and 6, it is 9. So negative 9 is going to be smaller than negative 6. Think about it as well as the number 6 is closer to the 0, if you're picturing that number line. So the larger digit is the smaller number. And it's kind of backwards. That negative symbol is what makes it smaller. So the larger digit is 55 compared to 45. And so that is going to be the smaller negative number. Similarly, 1 and 7, if you're just looking at the digits, the bigger digit is the smaller negative number. Because they're negative, it's backwards. And negative 60 is the bigger digit, but because it's negative, it's going to be smaller than negative 40. So that's the hardest part, I think, is remembering that as you go farther away from 0, the numbers get smaller. Therefore, if you were just looking at the numbers, 60 and 40, negative 60 is smaller than negative 40. Now, we can just compare negative and positive numbers. That's fine and dandy. But when context or an idea is added to the numbers, we can then explain the meaning behind writing inequality with positive and negative numbers. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So here's going to be 3 examples. So fill these in. These go right along with your notes. You can talk about the idea of temperature. And when you're comparing inequalities, you can use the words warmer or colder as words to describe and explain. The temperature was warmer one day compared to another, or you can say the opposite. The temperature was colder. Another topic is score of either games or sports. One score was either higher or lower than another. So we can use those words higher and lower when we are talking about the inequality and explaining what we're actually meaning. And the last topic I'm going to give you is that someone or something could be at a greater depth or greater height. Remember, depth is underneath the water, height is above the water, and so those are other ways that we can talk about inequalities. Greater depth could be the negative, or greater height. So I'm going to do a word problem with you to give you this idea of how to explain an inequality. This example deals with the temperature topic. So the temperature on Tuesday was 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and the temperature on Wednesday was negative 2 degrees Fahrenheit. We have to write an inequality, that's the first thing, and then explain the meaning of that inequality. So we're comparing Tuesday and Wednesday and the temperatures of each. There's actually 2 different answers that you could do that will both be correct. We could compare the 2 to the negative 2, or we could flip it around, and we could do the negative 2 and then the 2 on the right. The symbols will be different because the positive number is going to be the greater number, so we can say that 2 is greater than negative 2, or we could say that negative 2 is less than positive 2. So both of these are acceptable. The one that you pick will determine how you explain. So we are either going to say that the positive 2, or Tuesday's temperature, is greater or higher than Wednesday's, or we're going to say that Wednesday's is lower than Tuesday's. So it depends on which one you pick. I'm going to do both of them with you. So if I did the greater than, one way that I can explain this inequality and what it means, we're going to use the context, and then we're going to use those words, greater or less, or higher or lower. So the 2 stands for Tuesday, so we're going to say that Tuesday's temperature was higher than Wednesday's. So we use the word higher when we're talking and comparing those two numbers. For this one, we're just going to use the opposite, the lower, and we're going to switch our days around because we're starting with Wednesdays. So Wednesday's temperature temp was, instead of higher, we're going to say lower than Tuesdays. So in this case, we have to come up with our own inequality. We're not just putting the symbol in, and then we're actually talking about what this means with the ideas of temperature or scores or depth, depending on what the topic is. And they could be other ones. I just gave you 3. So you're going to have to do that in class tomorrow. The last part of this lesson is talking about ordering the integers. And so when we are ordering integers, we're going to get a bunch of them. Remember, a group of numbers with those braces, it's called a set. So ordering sets of numbers from greatest to least or least to greatest. The first tip is to order all of the negatives first, especially if we're going from least to greatest. Negatives will come in the order first because those are going to be the smaller ones, and then go ahead and order your positives. So we have 2 examples here. First one, we start out with 4 numbers. I'm going to circle my 2 negative numbers and then order those. Then I'm going to move on to the positive ones. So I know that the further away from 0 I am, the smaller the number is. So the larger digit, 26, is the smaller number. And then negative 11 comes. And then I have the 8 and the 10. That's easier for me to order. The 8 comes before the 10. And that is our answer. You can just list them out with commas. You don't need the braces. The last one has a little bit more numbers. You will see possibly more numbers like this. Again, I'm going to start with my negative numbers. And I want to make sure that I am marking up them so I don't forget them. So notice I've circled the negative ones. I'm going to start with the very smallest negative, the one that has the largest digit because it's further away from 0 is the smallest number. So that's negative 25. The next biggest is 18, if I'm just looking at the digits, remember. And so that's going to be the one that's moving closer to 0. And then the closest negative to 0 is negative 4. And now I just have my positive numbers left. We have 3, and then 12, and then 30. I almost ran out of room. So there you have it. We are going to order integers, explain inequalities, and just plain old compare positive and negative integers tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you then. Have a good night.